Picture this, brother. It's a humid Friday night in the city. The bar is buzzing with laughter, clinking glasses, and that low hum of music that makes your pulse quicken just a little. You're there, nursing a drink, watching the room. Guys are trying too hard, flexing, laughing too loud, throwing out cheesy lines. Women are scanning, smiling politely, but their eyes keep drifting like they're searching for something more. Then she walks in. The kind of woman who doesn't just enter a room, she shifts the energy in it. Her laugh carries across the crowd, her eyes sparkle with stories you want to hear, and her presence makes heads turn without her even trying. Every man in the place straightens up, adjusts his shirt, pretends he's not staring, but she looks right past most of them, until her gaze lands on you. It's not a quick glance, it lingers. She tilts her head slightly, a small smile playing on her lips, and starts walking your way through the crowd like the sea is parting just for her. She stops close enough that you catch the faint scent of her perfume mixed with the night air. Her voice is soft but confident as she leans in and says, "I don't usually do this, but something about you feels different, like I've been waiting to talk to you all night." Sounds like a movie scene, right? Pure fantasy for most guys, but for Jake, it became his reality. 6 months earlier, Jake was the guy nobody noticed. 28 years old, decent software job, average build, average conversations, and a dating history full of polite "you're nice" but texts that went nowhere. He'd replay dates in his head at 3 a.m., wondering why he could crack jokes with his buddies but couldn't spark anything real with a woman. Nice felt like a curse word. Then one stormy Thursday, soaked from the rain and defeated after yet another flat date, Jake ducked into a quiet little bookstore cafe he'd never seen before. The smell of old books and fresh espresso wrapped around him like a warm blanket. He ordered a black coffee, slumped into a worn leather booth, and started deleting dating apps in frustration. That's when the old man sat down across from him without asking. The stranger had sharp, knowing eyes, a neatly trimmed salt and pepper beard, and the kind of quiet confidence that made you sit up straighter. He looked like he'd lived 10 lifetimes and remembered every lesson. "You look like a man who's exhausted from being invisible," he said calmly. Jake let out a bitter laugh. "Is it that obvious?" The man, who introduced himself as Marcus, smiled. "I've seen hundreds of men like you. Good hearts, sharp minds, that they miss the 7 keys that turn polite interest into real heart-racing obsession. Not cheap tricks or fake personas, real psychological shifts that rewire how women experience you. The kind where she thinks about you when you're not around, cancels plans just to see you, and feels that pull she can't explain." Jake raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "That sounds too good to be true." Marcus leaned forward, his voice low and steady. "Stay and listen to one story. If it feels like nonsense, walk away. But even if a spark hits you, your life with women will never be the same." Jake stayed. The rain pounded the windows as Marcus began talking, not with dry advice, but with vivid, raw stories of men who had transformed everything. And as the night unfolded, Jake realized he was absorbing the first powerful trick without even realizing it was being taught. The first key was creating emotional mystery, given just enough to spark curiosity, but never enough to solve you completely. Marcus told the story of Daniel, a guy who used to be exactly like Jake, safe, predictable, always texting back instantly, always available. Daniel met Elena at an art gallery. Instead of spilling his whole life story or showering her with compliments, he shared one intriguing fragment. "Last year, I disappeared for a month to live in an old lighthouse on the coast. Needed to remember what real silence felt like." Then he smiled, changed the subject, and asked her a question that made her talk about her own hidden dreams. At the end of the night, he didn't beg for her number. He simply said, "I have a feeling our paths will cross again when the timing feels right," and walked away with calm confidence. Elena reached out the next morning, then again the day after. She couldn't stop wondering about that lighthouse story, about what else he hadn't said. Women's minds are wired to chase the unknown, to fill in the blanks with their imagination. Most men hand over their entire personality like an open book on date one. The man who leaves mystery becomes the puzzle she wants to solve. Jake felt a shift just hearing it. The very next weekend, at a friend's party, he met Mia, a witty graphic designer with eyes that seemed to challenge everyone. Normally, Jake would have rambled about his job, cracked safe jokes, and tried to keep the conversation going at all costs. This time, he tried something different. He mentioned casually, "I once quit everything for 3 months and hiked through remote mountains with just a notebook and questions about who I really was." When she pressed for more, he smiled playfully and said, "Some stories taste better when they unfold slowly." At the end of the night, he gave her number instead of asking for hers, and added, "Only text if you really want to know the rest." Mia messaged him before he even reached his apartment. That small win lit a fire in Jake, but Marcus had warned him, mystery is just the spark. The real addiction comes from what happens next. As the weeks passed, Jake kept meeting Marcus, sometimes in that same cafe, sometimes on quiet park benches at dusk, sometimes over strong coffee late into the night. Each conversation peeled back another layer, and the second key hit Jake hard, mastering the emotional roller coaster. Women don't fall deeply for constant comfort and agreeableness. They fall for contrast. The man who can swing them from uncontrollable laughter to feeling deeply seen and understood, then a sudden rush of desire, all in one flowing conversation. Marcus shared the tale of Alex, who dated Sophia, a sharp, high-powered lawyer used to men trying to impress her with stability. Alex teased her gently about her color-coded planner. "You plan your spontaneity too?" making her laugh until his sides hurt. Then, in a quieter moment, he looked at her seriously and said something so insightful about her fear of never being enough that she paused, vulnerable. He held the space without fixing it, lightly touched her hand, and said, "You don't have to carry that alone with me." Seconds later, he flipped back to playful banter that had her grinning again. Sophia told her friends she'd never felt so alive. The ups and downs created emotional intensity she couldn't get enough of. Jake tested it on his second hangout with Mia. He took her to a rooftop bar with city lights twinkling below. He started with ridiculous stories that had her laughing out loud, then asked one thoughtful question about a challenge she'd faced at work. When emotion flickered across her face, he didn't dodge it. He leaned in and reflected, "That sounds like it weighed on you more than you let on." The air between them grew thick with connection. Then, right when it felt intense, he cracked a light joke that broke the tension into laughter again. By the end of the night, Mia was leaning closer, her hand brushing his arm, already asking when they could do this again. Jake was starting to see real changes. His phone lit up more. Women seemed more engaged. But Marcus was clear. These keys gain power when they stack. The third key was one most men never master, listening like no other man on the planet. Not the heart-hearted, yeah, totally listening while you plan your next line. Real, full presence listening that makes her feel truly seen, heard, and understood, perhaps for the first time. Marcus described Thomas, a quiet man who turned his dating life around simply by asking one specific, personal question and then shutting up. He'd listen without interrupting, without jumping in with, "That reminds me of me." Instead, he'd reflect back what she said in his own words, showing genuine understanding. Women opened up to him about things they'd never shared with close friends. That level of emotional safety, mixed with growing attraction, creates a bond that feels addictive. Jake practiced it on a date with Lena, a creative soul with a quiet intensity. Instead of talking about himself, he asked, "What's one childhood memory that still makes you smile no matter what?" Then he listened, really listened, as she spoke about baking with her grandmother. He didn't hijack the story with his own anecdote. He simply said, "It sounds like those afternoons were your little pocket of peace in a noisy world." Lena's eyes softened. She reached across the table and held his hand for the rest of the evening. Later, she admitted no man had ever made her feel so completely seen. With 3 keys working together, Jake's confidence grew. Women weren't just replying, they were initiating. But Marcus pushed further, warning that surface-level charm fades without real depth and playfulness. The fourth key was becoming the playful challenger, the man who never hands her an easy win. Most guys chase, agree with everything, and put women on a pedestal. The rare man teases lightly, challenges her opinions in a fun, bantering way, and makes her invest a little in winning his attention. Marcus recounted Ryan's story with Victoria, a confident executive who was used to men folding. When she boasted about winning every debate, Ryan grinned and shot back, "Careful, I might actually enjoy proving you wrong on that one." The back-and-forth banter flew, full of laughter and spark. She loved the challenge. Soon she was sending him sarcastic texts at midnight just to keep the game alive. Jake tried it with Priya, a passionate woman with strong opinions. When she said she only dated super-ambitious types,
But Jake didn't master these keys overnight. The real transformation came through trial and error, awkward moments that made him cringe later, and those quiet victories that kept him hooked on the process. After that rooftop night with Mia, where the emotional roller coaster had her leaning in and laughing one minute, opening up vulnerably the next, Jake felt unstoppable. His phone buzzed with her good morning text the following day. "Still smiling about last night? When are you free again?" He smiled at the screen, remembering Marcus's words about contrast creating addiction. But he also remembered the warning, don't overdo it or the ride becomes chaotic instead of exciting. He decided to layer in the third key, deep soul-level listening, on their next date. They met at a cozy Italian spot with candlelight flickering on wooden tables. Mia looked stunning in a simple black dress, her hair falling loosely over one shoulder. As they ordered wine and pasta, Jake resisted the urge to fill every silence with stories about his coding projects or weekend hikes. Instead, after she mentioned a stressful deadline at her design firm, he asked gently, "What's the part of your job that actually lights you up, even on the tough days?" Mia paused, twirling her fork. Most guys would have jumped in with advice or their own work complaints, but Jake just listened. He maintained soft eye contact, nodded at the right moments, and when she described how creating visuals that told real human stories made her feel alive, he reflected back, "It sounds like that's not just work for you. It's a way of making sense of the world, of turning chaos into something beautiful that people connect with." Her eyes widened slightly. She set her fork down and leaned forward. "No one's ever put it like that." "Yeah, exactly." For the next 20 minutes, she opened up about her fears of not being creative enough, about a childhood where her parents pushed her towards stable careers instead of art. Jake didn't interrupt with solutions. He held the space, asked one or two clarifying questions, and truly heard her. By the time dessert arrived, tiramisu they shared with 2 spoons, the conversation had shifted from surface level to something deeper, warmer. Mia's foot brushed his under the table accidentally on purpose. She laughed softly and didn't pull away. That night, as Jake walked her to her car, she hugged him longer than usual. "I don't know what it is about you," she whispered, "but talking to you feels safe and exciting at the same time." She drove off, and Jake stood there under the streetlights, heart pounding. The combination was working. Mystery from the first meeting, roller coaster on the rooftop, and now real listening that made her feel seen. But he still had blind spots. A few days later, Jake almost ruined the momentum with Sarah, a woman he'd matched with on an app before meeting Marcus. They grabbed coffee, and old habits crept in. He talked too much about himself, interrupted her once when she mentioned her travel dreams, and tried to fix her story about a bad ex by offering unsolicited advice. Sarah smiled politely, but the spark fizzled. She texted later saying she was super busy this week. Jake stared at the message, frustrated. He called Marcus that evening. "Classic mistake," Marcus said over the phone, his voice calm but firm. "You went back to performing instead of connecting. Listening isn't passive, it's the most active thing you can do. It makes her invest emotionally because she feels truly understood. Most men are waiting for their turn to speak. You become unforgettable when you make her feel like the only person in the room." Jake took the lesson to heart. He practiced in everyday life, with coworkers, friends, even his barista. He started noticing how people lit up when genuinely heard. And when he applied it again with Lena, the creative soul from the earlier date, the results were electric. They met at a small art exhibition downtown. Paintings lined the walls in soft lighting, and jazz played quietly in the background. Lena was passionate about abstract expressionism, gesturing animately as she explained a piece that reminded her of her grandmother's stories. Jake asked, "What memory does this painting pull up for you?" Then he listened, fully present, body angled toward her, no phone in sight. When she shared a vulnerable story about losing her grandmother young and how art helped her process grief, he reflected, "It sounds like those brushstrokes aren't just colors on canvas, they're a way you keep her voice alive inside you." Lena stopped mid-sentence, eyes glistening. She touched his arm lightly. "Wow, you get it." The rest of the evening flowed effortlessly. They wandered the gallery, talking about life, dreams, and fears. By closing time, she invited him to a late-night food truck for tacos. As they ate, standing under string lights, she confessed, "I usually don't open up this fast, but with you, it feels natural." That night ended with a long, charged hug and her texting him the next morning with a photo of a painting she thought he'd like. Jake was starting to stack the keys naturally. Mystery kept her curious. The roller coaster added emotional intensity. Deep listening built trust and bonding. But Marcus had emphasized the fourth key as the spark that turned warmth into playful fire, becoming the light-hearted challenger. Women are used to men who say yes to everything, who chase approval. The man who teases her gently, who challenges her in a fun way without being mean, makes her work a little for the connection. It creates tension, the good kind, that feels like flirting on steroids. He told Jake the full story of Ryan and Victoria. Victoria was a sharp corporate lawyer, beautiful and used to winning every room she entered. Guys usually complimented her endlessly or agreed with her politics to impress her. Ryan did the opposite on their first date at a rooftop lounge. When she declared confidently that she always won arguments in court, Ryan leaned back with a mischievous grin and said, "That's cute, but I bet I could make you question at least one of your closing statements if we went head-to-head over drinks." Victoria raised an eyebrow, surprised but intrigued. "Oh, really? You think you could handle me in a debate?" "Handle? No. Enjoy the battle with? Absolutely," Ryan shot back, eyes twinkling. The banter flew, teasing, laughing, her trying to win points while he dodged and countered playfully. She loved it. By the end of the night, she was leaning in, touching his arm and challenging him right back. She texted him the next day with a sarcastic meme, "Exhibit A, why you're wrong already." The game kept going for weeks, building delicious tension until it naturally turned romantic. Jake tested this with Priya, the fiery marketing executive with strong opinions and a quick wit. They met for drinks at a speakeasy bar with dim lighting and vintage cocktails. When Priya said she only dated men who were extremely ambitious and had their life perfectly mapped out, Jake didn't nod eagerly like most guys would. He smirked, took a slow sip of his old-fashioned, and replied, "Ambitious enough to steal your attention even if my map has a few detours and surprise adventures on it. Challenge accepted." Priya laughed, genuinely surprised. "You're cocky." "Confident," he corrected with a wink. "There's a difference. Tell me why your perfect map is so rigid anyway. Afraid of a little spontaneity?" The conversation turned into a fun back and forth. She teased him about his detours. He challenged her need for control in a light way. "Careful, or I might plan a surprise weekend trip just to prove you secretly love it." She hit his shoulder playfully, eyes sparkling. You wouldn't dare, but her smile said she hoped he would. By the end of the night, she was the one suggesting they grab dinner again soon, and she texted him a playful debate topic the next afternoon. Jake could feel the difference. Women weren't just responding, they were investing energy, chasing the spark, thinking about him between dates. But stacking all four keys brought new challenges. One evening with Mia, he tried too much challenge too soon after a deep listening moment, and the tone shifted from fun to slightly defensive. She pulled back a little, saying, "You're full of surprises tonight." Jake recovered quickly by softening with genuine appreciation. "Hey, I just love seeing that fire in you. It's attractive as hell."
The roller coaster swung back up, and she melted again. He learned balance was everything. Mystery without listening felt cold. Roller coaster without challenge felt chaotic. Challenge without deep presence felt arrogant. When layered right, they created an irresistible pull. Marcus shared more stories to drive the lessons home. There was the quiet accountant named Thomas, who transformed from nice but boring to magnetic simply by mastering listening combined with mystery. On dates, Thomas would ask one powerful question like, "What's something you're proud of that no one ever compliments you on?" Then he'd listen fully, reflect thoughtfully, and leave one intriguing detail about himself hanging. "That reminds me of a time I faced something similar in a completely different world," without explaining further. Women started chasing him, wanting to uncover the rest. Another man, Alex, used the emotional roller coaster masterfully with Sophia. One date he had her laughing hysterically with self-deprecating travel disaster stories, then shifted to a quiet moment where he noticed her hidden stress and said, "You carry a lot with that smile of yours, don't you?" She opened up about work pressure. He held the space, offered no quick fixes, then flipped back to playful teasing about her superhuman planner skills. Sophia later admitted the contrast made her feel more alive than any stable, predictable date ever had. Her brain kept replaying the evening, dopamine hitting from the laughs and the depth. Jake started seeing these patterns everywhere, in movies, in friends' relationships, even in his own past failures. He realized most men stayed flat, always nice, always available, always the same energy. No mystery, no swings, no real listening, no playful edge. No wonder dates fizzled. As weeks turned into months, Jake's life expanded beyond dating. He noticed women at the gym, at salsa classes he'd started, at networking events, all responding differently because his energy had shifted. He wasn't trying to impress anymore. He was becoming someone interesting to be around. But Marcus